Hello, my name is Kaylee, and I am going to be leading you through my personal life literacy today. From the moment I started reading, I never stopped. Reading has transformed my life and truly become a part of me. There is nearly never a point where I will not have a book on my person. My range of reading extends through many different genres, from romance and fantasy novels to horror and thrillers. I'll even throw in a good classic every once in a while. One of my most recent enjoyable reads was Crime and Punishment. I enjoyed delving into the idea of morality through my reading. I will always find time to read, even when I am drowning in schoolwork and really shouldn't be reading. I will find a way to read a chapter or two. Some of my favorite books include Karen Marie Moning's The Fever series, Stephen King's The Shining, George Orwell's 1984, and even Shakespeare's play A Midsummer Night's Dream. Now let's get into my personal literacy over the years. I will first begin by discussing my early years of exposure to literacy before moving on to my middle and older years of literacy. Early years of literacy. My earliest exposures to literacy that I can remember were experienced in my toddler years, around 3 to 4 years old. I remember snuggling with my dad while he would read me picture books. I distinctly remember making my dad read me Dr. Seuss's ABC every single night for a few years, to the point where he had the book memorized by heart. Even now, I can still hear his voice reading the book aloud to me with the exact fluctuations in his voice. During this time, I was also exposed to texturized picture books and had lots of fun reading and playing with these books. Another favorite book of mine was The Hungry Hungry Caterpillar, which was one of the first books that I learned to read by myself.
Seuss's ABC. Big A, little a, what begins with A? Aunt Annie's alligator, A.
Middle years of literacy. Elementary school is where my love of reading really took off. In kindergarten, I remember sitting on the carpet during class and learning the alphabet and the days of the week with my classmates. I was also exposed to high levels of phonics. However, I do not remember much else about my kindergarten exposures to literacy besides that. Grade 1 is where I had my first experience of being read aloud to by a teacher. Mrs. Silvecki read us the first book in the Magic Treehouse series, Dinosaurs Before Dark. I loved this read aloud so much that I continued to read the rest of the series on my own. However, even though I enjoyed this read aloud, I did not enjoy much else about grade 1 in regards to literacy. I had an unfortunate experience with my teacher during journal time. I was writing a little story in my journal and was writing way more than any other student because I was having fun. However, our teacher had said when we were finished, we were to come sit on the carpet to begin our next lesson. Since I was writing so much, I was not done when everyone else was. That was when my teacher yanked my journal out of my hands and told me off in front of the whole class. I went home crying after that. Safe to say I did not enjoy writing much for a brief period of time after that. Another negative experience I had with literacy in grade 1 was with the leveled reading program that we were supposed to spend our independent reading time on. I was a very avid reader and was reading at a much higher level than what was available to me. I often read a grade or two above my grade level at this point. Due to this, I became bored with many of the readings assigned during class time and did not want to participate in the program. In grade 2, I was exposed to another read aloud. This time it was Roald Dahl's Witches. I had the coolest teacher in grade 2, and she would come up with completely different voices for each character that she was speaking for. I loved this read aloud and would often ask her to suggest other Roald Dahl books for me to read, which eventually led me to do a book report on George's Marvelous Medicine later in that year. Grade 4 is where my reading really picked up. In grade 4, I began to read at a much higher level. This is when I began to read the Harry Potter series. It took me only 2 months to finish that to finish reading that series all by myself, and it is still one of my absolute favorite series to this day. While I was in grade 4, I also began to volunteer in the kindergarten classroom to help teach those students how to read. I remember enjoying this a lot and having fun with the children. I believe that this experience is what first made me want to become a teacher when I grew up. In grade 5, my class did a novel study on Rick Riordan's The Lost Hero. During this novel study, we would have many class discussions after each chapter and do comprehension questions along the way. At the beginning of the novel study, we would then be put into a group to give a presentation on one of the key plot points in the book, which I found to be very fun and meaningful for my education. This was also another case in which I then read the rest of the series after completing the class novel study. Older years of literacy. When I was 12 years old, I had my first exposure to manga. I had purchased a manga that, looking back at it, was probably too old and mature for me at that time, but I was determined to read it. Through reading manga, I experienced some difficulties at first, having to readjust to the orientation of reading, right to left instead of left to right. But once I got used to the orientation of manga, I fell in love with it and enjoyed how I could look at art while reading. In grade 9, I had my first exposure to Shakespeare. In my English class, we read A Midsummer's Night Dream, which is still my favorite play to this day. We then did this play in my grade 9 drama class, and I was chosen to play the role of Puck. This opportunity truly gave me the chance to practice my oral literacy skills in a fun way. We continued to be exposed to Shakespeare all throughout my high school years, and I greatly enjoyed it. In my Math 31 IB class, instead of completing our math assignment and homework for the day, my friends and I decided to watch the 2020 US election instead. We would each be watching different news platforms and discussing the differences and biases that were seen between each platform in regards to which presidential candidates they were supporting. Doing this greatly increased my media literacy and critical literacy skills. One aspect of poetry that I really did not like all throughout my life was poetry. I had an intense hatred towards poetry. In the beginning, it was because I could not understand what was actually going on in the poems. However, as I got older and older, I found that I did not like the way that the unit on poetry was being taught to me. It seemed like we were reading and analyzing the most boring poems ever. When I begin to teach literacy, I hope that I am able to make it more fun for my students and allow more opportunities for them to be creative with poetry and not have them set in strict regimes and guidelines like I was. Through re-exposing myself to my personal literacy development, I have realized just how important literacy is in the modern world. And it has shown me that in order to get children into reading, writing, and other literacy skills, you have to start early and expose them to books that they will actually like, rather than run-of-the-mill books that are purely focused on teaching phonics or text structure. I hope that I will be able to create an effective way and create an environment where the children that I am teaching will truly enjoy reading and literacy.